こんばんは。今始まってる？オッケーかな。よいしょ。はい、皆さんこんばんは。よいしょ。配信開始です。あれ、もう高評価ついてる？なんで？ちょっと待って、自分の声めっちゃ聞こえる。うるさいな。困る。高評価ありがとうございます。マジでこのサムネやばいでしょ。5秒ぐらいで作ったからね。いや、なんかね、ちょっと今日アルセウスのあれと被っちゃってんのがね、まずいよね。うわ、めっちゃ可愛い VTuber さんや。めっちゃかっこよくないこの子。女の子？男だよね。立ち方めっちゃ女の子っぽい。かわいい。かわいい。フォローしとこうかな。リツイートしよう。でフォローもしとこう。めちゃくちゃ可愛いんだけど。まあでも声だからな、実際な。いや、いいや。よいしょ。じゃあ、始めますか。早速ね、ちょっと飲み物飲まして。ちょっと一つ言わなきゃいけないことがあって中の方、すぐにやめてください。こういうゲームね。こういうゲームです。今ね、一回オンラインに行ってからストーリーモード行こうと思ってます。ダメだ、笑いすぎてよくないよ。ちょっとお食事中の方、今すぐ見るのやめてください。これどうなってんの？茶色に関してはよくわからんて。おかしくなる。あ、来た俺何色？緑だ俺緑っぽいわ。あ、引っかかった。簡単。 笑いすぎておかしくなる。こんなこんなゲームがあっていいのか。俺見たりなんだよ。ほら、落ちろ。落ちろ。ほら、マジか。ねえ。おい、音えげつないって。ダメだ。おい。やってる精神状態大丈夫かマジで。おい、もう白い液体はまずいって。友達とめっちゃやってた。めっちゃあります。オンラインはこんな感じです。あと一回オンラインやったらストーリーモード行こうかな。ゲーモンって入ってるんですか？お前じゃない。俺にもこれ食わせろ。オッケーオッケー。マジでやめて。ねえ、本当にダメ。ごめん、本当に食事中の方申し訳ない。今すぐみんなやめてほしい。チームね。何ですか？これ初めてだな。なるほど。サッカーみたいなもん。持ってけそれ。まずい。違う。重くなった。やばい、2対1負けてるよ。何これ。ボール出てこなくなったけど。登り方一緒。マジで。おい、やばい。よし。持ってけ。ナイス。オッケー。入ったでしょ、これ。オッケー。ちょっとこのゲーム。ねえ、何それ。ベクトルどうなってんねん。お待ちます。笑いすぎてあれ、2人消えた。あれ、1人消えてるのか。あれや、食うやつや。また1人消えた。は？え、なに？ 2 チームス。ダックスいる。なにこれ。出てくんな。あ、これちょっと楽しいかも。マジなんだよこれ。ね、本当にごめん。こういうの大好き。 飛んでったって。オンライン終わりかな。マジでこれ人来ないの一番しんどいからな。マジで。どうせ4人もいいのこれ今。待って、俺こんなのでテンション上がってるとこ見られたくないんだけど。はい、退出しまーす。はい、ありがとうな。とりあえず終わるわ、俺。とりあえずストーリーモードやってみようかな。本当に4人も見てる。もしよかったらね、コメントの方もぜひよろしくお願いします。見てくれてありがとう。配信宣伝しとくか、P様で。配信宣伝みたいな。宣伝がある。P 様の方、iPhone6S 待つ。ゲームでやろうか。言うてコンティニューやったことないからな。ダメだ。笑いすぎて。ノックザアップルオフザツリー、木のナッツ、リンゴの木を叩け。プレスペーストゥプルフロムバット。あー、なるほど。スペースで、前後を切り替えることができるんだね。あー、強いじゃん。イートザアップルで、こっちをメインにして食うと。オッケーオッケー。いいじゃんね。うんこ出したって。叩いて食う。オッケー。壊死してるってフロンチ。オッケー、前に切り替えろと。Go to the sandbox。砂の全部食えるんちゃうんか。食えなかったわ。壊死してます。No one will ever love you。 どういうこと？うおー、なんか来た、なんか来た。怖い怖い怖い。やばいやばいやばい。何これ。怖い怖い怖い。こいつら強すぎるって。でかいでかいでかいでかいでかい。待って待って待って。何これ。びっくりした。
John woke to the shrill cry of his alarm clock and lay there, rigid, his usual morning condition. But there was another reason John couldn't get out of bed. It was the weight. A weight that had nothing to do with his muscles or fat or sweaty blankets. John was weighed down by a piece of paper. The invitation to his high school reunion. From across the years, the words he'd heard in the schoolyard were still clear. You're a loser. No one will ever love you.
You are a loser 言われた。どういうこと？水門アンティル。お、マジか。どうすんのこれ。お、来た来た来た。はい、まず止めて。
John threw on an outfit. He didn't feel comfortable wandering around his home naked.
なんかどんどん着ていけばいいと思う。これだね、ちょっと仕事行くっぽいからスーツで脱いじゃった。違うね。やばいの入ってる。何あれ。あ、オッケー。
John needed to shower and wash off the sweaty stink of desperate sadness.
これでね
Most people would shower, then dress, but John was running late.
息子きれいにしてた。あ、待って、俺服着ちゃったじゃん。大丈夫？シャワーをで、歯ブラシ。どういうこと？こういうこと？口そっちなの？こっちっぽいな、なんか。あ、そっち切んないと。あ、これ玉の方が引っかかる。玉って言っちゃった。こっち口なのかよ。ソープ。石鹸がね、ちゃんと戻さないとな。
They say cleanliness is next to godliness, but at that moment cleanliness was next to his prostate.
おい、なんでもケツ入るやん、もうこいつ。やだ、もうこのゲームやめたい。前にしよう。あ、吐き出した。あ、ドアそっちに回すんだ。なんか、歯車ある。これ大事な書類ちゃん。いいか。とりあえず会社行くか。
John had 3 months until the reunion to turn his life around. First, he needed to clean up. The only reason he'd ordered so much takeout was because Delilah, the delivery peen, made John feel butterflies in his testicles.
ご飯食べてお腹いっぱいにしようと。何でも入るね。
If John took the toaster to the shower, he wouldn't have to worry about the reunion.
塩食ったってピーって何？ほら入れ入れほら入れ。オッケー。パイナップルも食っとくか。おいパイナップル絶対痛いってこれ。おバカバカバカなんか燃えてる燃えてる燃えてる。熱々熱々熱々。
John's head was on fire. He seemed surprised. He shouldn't have been.
彼は驚いた。パイナップルは食えないの。チーズ作ろうか。オッケー。
John suddenly realized the time. Distracted by his new drive to improve his life, he had become late. He needed to hurry, or he'd miss the bus to work.
初見さんいらっしゃい。待って、俺初見さんいんのにこのゲームやんなきゃいけないの。なんかサボテン倒れてるって。あ、痛い痛い痛い痛い。あ、ペイン。だって今玉ヒュンした。俺のもやばい。何すればいいの？何すればいいんだっけ
？John called it his study, but it was basically for games and porn. Mostly porn.
おいこれやろ。そういうこと？なんかこの世界線ではこれがエロいとされてるってこと？ AV ってこと今のが。突っ込めるなら何でもいいんだ。
He was wasting time, dawdling, procrastinating. What had John achieved? Aside from a mountain of crumpled tissues.
おい、ちょっと。外出よう。
John had left his apartment late, but if he caught the express bus, he might make it to work on time. John didn't really like his job, but it had two qualities in its favor. One, he could pay his rent, and two, Barbara. Currently John's top candidate for his reunion date.
バスを捕まえろ。何これ？鳥死んでる。鳥も鳥もあれなの。
John noticed a moderately attractive peen waiting at the stop. He tried to start a conversation and did not get the reaction he'd hoped for. It was probably because he was a minimum wage peen. She could probably sense it.
ごめんなさい。めっちゃ威嚇されてる。エッチじゃん。うるせえよ。性癖どうなってんだよ。バス乗んないと。
The office hummed with cold fluorescent lighting. The air was cold and stale, lifeless. How long had John worked here? Long enough to deserve better.
やべ、びちゃびちゃになっちゃった。フレッシュコープ。フレッシュコープらしい。びっくりした。何してる？カバン使ってんだ。じゃあ開かない。びっくりした。ごめんなさい。大丈夫か？大丈夫かこいつ。ごめんなさい。なんか履いてるって大丈夫あれ？ちょっと待って。
John was late, but he felt daring. He could sneak into the office through the archives, or he could stroll through the front entrance with enough confidence to bluff his boss.
ノーエントリー入っちゃうね。絶対ダメ。ごめん。入社早々やらかした。帰ろうかなもう。なんか赤いって何これ紙で切ったってこと？いった紙で切っちゃったじゃん。嘘でしょ？チンチンって言っちゃった。ごめんなさい。ちょっと待って。ジョンだよね、確かこいつの名前。ジョンってことですか？
John decided to creep in through the archives.
入んなって言われると入りたくなっちゃうな。また消火器あった。
Despite the obvious flaws, John thought it was a good plan and not a recipe for humiliation.
死んでないあれ。大丈夫か？死んでるよねあれ。大丈夫？
There was Carl, napping at work, just like every day for the past month. John envied him.
死んでるよねこれ絶対。やば。怖い。そういうホラーゲームもしてる。消火器入っちゃった。すごい太い。ちょっとね、太いじゃねえよ。なんか23分の20。死んでるよねこれ。かわいそうに。出れねえし。かわいそう。俺もああなっちゃうのかな、色的に。本当にやめて。クリーンなイメージでやってるんで、ちょっとよくわかんないこと言われるとちょっと困っちゃいますね。待って、これ終わった？これ積んだって。積んでるってこれ。積むの早いってこのゲーム。一旦この辺掃除しよう。待って。もう積んだの？やばくない？食えないかな、これ。また痛い。早くない？積むの。入るなってそういうこと？出れなくなるから入るなってこと？痛い。バカ、めっちゃ切ってるって。なんとかして。おい、これ設計したの誰だよ。
The office hummed with cold fluorescent lighting. The air was cold and stale, lifeless. How long had John worked here? Long enough to deserve better. John was late, but he felt daring. He could sneak into the office through the archives, or he could stroll through the front entrance with enough confidence to bluff his boss. Predictably, he chose the direct route. John was nearly trampled by the morning coffee rush. Everyone else was hard at work, grinding away. John might actually get away with this. The boss. He homed in on John, deluging him with spit and buzzwords. The boss ran out of synonyms for John's failings and gave him an ultimatum. Barbara would definitely not be interested in dating John if he was unemployed. He had to get to the quality assurance department. There might be a faulty dildo just waiting to cost the company millions in lawsuits. John would have to test them all. Every atom of John's rectum began to vibrate with the frequencies of pure pleasure. His orifice was a paradise. This vibrator would end all wars. It was good. That one was good too. The Prostate Pounder X900 series, the most advanced vibrator on the market. Sweet mother of... No, John, that's too much pleasure for one anus to handle.
50個試せなかったね。やば、これジョンのバイブでこんな。わあ、やばいじゃん。ごめんなさい。暴れてきだってジョン。誰かしら死ぬぞこんな。
John's butt hurt, but his heart was proud. If that vibe had gotten out into the world, it could have injured a customer as badly as it had ravaged his anus.
まず冷やして、で、絆創膏を貼る。お、うまくね。
The boss arrived and congratulated John on taking one for the team and jumping on the hand grenade, or in this case, putting it up his butt. John was having trouble following the conversation because he was quite high on suppository painkillers. And then the boss said it. Promotion. Finally, the company was recognizing John's hard work and ignoring his minor faults like lack of talent, constant lateness, and flatulence. John's new office smelt like polished wood and success. John's success. Sam dropped by. He'd heard John had been hurt. John said he was fine. He wasn't a softie to complain about a mildly ruptured rectum. Besides, he had a promotion to celebrate. John had met Sam in college during a sports ball game. He'd given him some stiff competition. Not stiff enough. They'd started at Flesh Corp product testing together. Nothing builds a friendship like a long day of dildo mounting. Yes, John had known Sam for a while. But John couldn't hang out with Sam. He had a reunion to prepare for. He was going out with Barbara tonight. He just had to ask her.
雑な使い物なんなくなってる。これやろ？違うな。バーバラ？何を探すの？ファイトだよね、探すの。また切れてる。
Everyone was quiet, listening to the presentation. A good moment for John to ask Barbara out.
会議してる。アスクババラアウト。
That's not Barbara, John. Barbara agreed. Well, she nodded. Sort of. Things were really going John's way.
まだなんか垂らしてるって。
John tried to act as suave as possible and listened to Barbara talk business. He didn't want to blow his chances at long-term love and short-term sex. Barbara began to talk about monthly feedback figures, and John started to zone out, imagining him and Barbara at the reunion, a power couple. She would make his classmates sick with envy, if he could get her to tone down the boring chatter. John's balls were gripped by certainty. Barbara was the perfect date for the reunion. Despite Barbara's protests that it was unnecessary, John knew that a true gentleman should follow her home. He was excited. There was still 3 months until the reunion, and he'd already landed his perfect date. All he had to do was seal the deal. Barbara thanked John for the evening and politely did not invite him inside for coffee or sex, even though John had dropped some pretty obvious hints he'd be into both, or just the sex. The door slammed on John's hopes. He didn't understand. He'd laughed at all Barbara's pie chart jokes. He'd listened to her boring stories. The blank eyes of the lawn flamingos were witnesses to John's shame. John began the lonely walk home, thoughts tumbling like shoes in a dryer. He had done everything wrong. Barbara had led him on just to humiliate him. John felt empty. How could he get love? He felt like he was missing something, some key to attracting sex. But John was shooting blanks. What did Peens want? Then it hit John out of nowhere. Stuff. He had the success. He just needed to show it off. But where was John going to get all the stuff he wanted? John needed a sign. A new day, a new John. He waited outside his local buttload store for it to open, eager to spend his promotion bonus on stuff. The best way to impress women. There's nothing like a rectum full of money to make a peen feel like a man. Suddenly it occurred to John that he was going to make a lot of choices. And every one of those choices would tell the world who he was. Did he want cheese or sausage?
チーズとソーセージを変えってこと？
Delicious.
これ本当にソーセージか？
Also delicious.
これ本当にソーセージ
How
か？
could John decide? Just so Moorish. What would a date think when they sat in John's home? Comfort or style? John went with comfort. Plus, it matched the couch he already had. John weighed up all the differences, but this was a tough choice. Something told John this was the TV for him.
世界のテレビ。
John chose the extremely, obviously bad TV.
やっぱ時代はデジタルっしょ。買いますこれ。
John realized that it was only 2 months and 29 days until the reunion. Time flies. Cactus or rose? Was John a rugged hero or a romantic poet?
サボテンうちにあったしな。バラかな。今度。
If John grew his own flowers, then he'd save on romantic gestures in the long run. There was nothing John could take with him to the grave.
自分の買うの？別に死んだ後なんかどうでもいいか。安い方でやる。
Except his coffin. John liked to get his pizza delivered. That way he could see Delilah, the delivery peen. She always made him smile.
パイナップルフリーってパイナップル入ってないんだよね。入ってた方がいいね。
Delilah thought pineapple on pizza was gross. This way, she would never know John's shameful tastes. What bedding would Delilah prefer? John couldn't help wondering. Pizza sheets would show her that John could also deliver in bed. Devoid of any sense of style, buying new clothes would be John's toughest challenge. John felt sharp and also like a phony. A nice fit, but could John pull off the color? The silky fabric made John feel like a celebrity. When was the last time John had been to the beach?
かわいいねこれ。かわいいね。
John might want to take the hem up a bit.
女の子か。こっちが男や。
Very spunk rock.
慣れたもんよ、そうさ。オッケー、これにしよう。
John decided to go with the outfit. Music, the food of love. Should John go retro sophisticated or just retro? John was sure he could just pirate extra records. Every can was made of metal, pulled from the bones of the earth, wrestled to the surface and smelted in roaring furnaces. All so John could buy peas preserved in salty water and stick them up his butt. John's new purchases were on the way to his apartment. All he had to do was invite a date over. One look at all his stuff and they'd be overwhelmed with sexual desire. John felt proud and also hungry. It gave him an idea. He should invite Delilah over for dinner.
全くわからんこのゲーム。うわー、買いすぎだね。
John was excited. Delilah was on her way. He just needed to set the mood to romance.
OK、ミュージックね。セットミュージック。キャンドルズ、キャンドルズ。これね。一回置きたいな。一回置いて。持ちたい。持て。持つんだよ。お、食った。ケツで火つける。ケツの。やけどするぞ。すげえ。こんなことしたの？こんなことないんだ。あ、またついちゃった。
John hoped she didn't have allergies.
デートかなこれは。あ、
That must be Delilah at the door.
ちょっと待ってね。はい、出ますよ。バラ持ってきたかったけど。
The door opened and there was Delilah. John gulped down his nerves and invited her in. John could tell that Delilah was impressed by his stuff. It was time to crank up the mood to seduction.
君のためにバラを用意したんだよ。オフワイン。ワインを持ってきて。
John wanted to offer Delilah wine, but he'd already popped his cork. Delilah started looking as nervous as John felt. He assumed it was because she was shy too. They really were compatible. Of course, at the reunion, he couldn't mention Delilah was a delivery peen. That would be embarrassing. Delilah suddenly headed for the door. And just like that, John was alone again. Delilah hadn't even looked at his stuff. Not even the pizza bedspread. The rejection burned. John felt insignificant. He had everything he wanted. The job, the money, the stuff. So much stuff. He wanted to destroy all of it. Shove it into the abyss. His stuff didn't matter. He was a shaft in the machine. A lonely piston pumping away like all the others in his rigid place. Fuck off, inanimate objects. Nothing special about him. Why should Delilah or Barbara or any other peen be interested in dating him? He was just like everyone else and they could tell. John wanted to be special, but he had to face the numb truth. He wasn't. And all the money and stuff he'd ever accumulate wouldn't change that. Die, couch! He thought it would make him unique, but it just made him more like everyone else. He should leave it all. Get out of this little town and go on an adventure. See the world. He was a boring corporate drone, but he didn't have to be. He could be a traveler, exploring jungles and climbing mountains. He could visit the wonders of the world and get his picture taken. Like Peony Island, the unspoiled paradise he'd seen on TV. That was it. John had to travel. Bags packed, John was ready to put 5,000 miles between him and his problems. He was leaving it all behind. John was so close, he could almost smell the freedom of the skies. Security sent John back through the detector.
Board your light, empty pockets. Empty pockets. なんか爆弾食ったけど、わかった、帰ればいいね。
John had forgotten he had his nail clippers with him. He'd have to buy another pair soon, or he'd look ridiculous.
ごめんなさい、見たくなかったらすぐに見るのやめてください。はい、爪切りダメなんだ、空港。
When the acceleration of takeoff had slackened, John felt a sweet relief. He had left his worries on the runway. He was up in the clouds, on his way to adventure. John's adventure had begun at last, and clearly it was a small world after all, and also a flat one. That was going to piss off the globeheads.
そういうことね。オッケーオッケーオッケー。13箇所に突っ込めばいいと。バカバカ。おわ、金。これ突っ込む場所なんてないよ。逆にむしろ。あ、逆にね。はい。突っ込んだり突っ込まないってことはこれもそういうことでしょ。ほら、オッケー。だんだん慣れてきてる。ああ、国ごとによって違うんだ。万里の長城、中国かな。これ日本だよね。入んなくね。お、バカ壊しちゃったよ。え、いいの？壊してもいいんだ。
John was having fun, but something told him he needed to go home. Probably his empty bank account. John was on his way back home. He was out of money, but money can't buy love. What it can buy are the experiences that had made John a more interesting and developed person, with 100 Buttstagram photos to prove it. Finally, everything was going smoothly. John felt good to be back on the familiar ground of home, but he would feel better to be on the familiar mattress of home. John really loved a good prank. It took John back to his summer job picking cacti. He hadn't gone back.
あ、もう痛いよ。水キャッチ、ロードザトラック。水キャッチか？トラックの道。トラックと一緒にみたいな。何かと一緒にトラックに乗る。待って。これでしょ。これだって絶対に。自分の荷物持って、犬入れ流れてきたって。生物ダメでしょ。帰ろうね。
Despite John's swell of fresh optimism, traveling was exhausting, and he just really wanted to get home and get some sleep.
Go to the left, go to the right. Press space. You are lunch. お前に飯を食え。みんなランチなんだよね。珍しい。スペースto launch. ピンドユア。俺のロッカー。俺じゃん。お？ラブレターもらったけど。帰ろうぜ、早く。ワクワクしてきた。おー、バラだね。バラ色だよ、人生。ラブレター来たの。 あ、誰か送るの？
Another nightmare. John's stress about getting a date for the reunion was making him think of her. Harmony. He hadn't seen her in years. Would she be at the reunion? John shook off the thought. He wasn't a child. He was a fully grown penis. John, why is the bathroom barricaded? Foreskin's sake! Is that a swan? John had no idea how it had gotten into his home or why it hated him so much. It would probably be best to leave it alone. John's butt started to buzz. Had he left a vibrator up there? Whatever it was, he should get it out. John's old phone. They really were indestructible. It was Sam calling. He wanted to check in on John. The travel looked fun, but it was so sudden. Was John okay? Sam was such a softie, always worrying about feelings. John had only one feeling, and it was the feeling of being awesome. He could drop Sam a text, but John was on a mission. The reunion was getting closer, and he had to get a date. Fortunately, John knew exactly where to find love. John held his breath. He was about to meet his match. He had to reassure himself he could do this. He had a good job. He had nice stuff. He had traveled. He was ready to find love. On Wiener, where all his sexy travel photos would give him the pick of the pack. Hot. Sexy. Very nice. Nice shaft. Very hot. Gorgeous. Worth a shot. Looks hot. Please.
1 hour later. お下劣。いいな。あ、もう1時間ずっとやってんのこれ。
Yep, the pick of the pack.
何？マッチ。ゲットエニマッチ。マッチしよう。マッチしてよ俺だって。タバコだ。かっこいい。Many hours later. めっちゃ時間かか。お、マッチした。
John had the pick of the pack.
イエーイ。マッチしたよ。アマンダ22。アマンダ22歳。
John valued honesty in a date, but he had been expecting a different kind of dirty. A sexy and much more hygienic kind.
うわ、びっくりした。自分いる。マリア35。35はちょっときついかもしれん。
John thought that getting circumcised once was enough.
これでいいんだ。
Oh,
better
put that on ice. It'll be okay, John. Chick sticks cars. I hope. After the reattachment surgery, the doctors had told John to rest. So he did, for 6 hours. Ugh, salty. Ugh. The date was off to a great start. Don't offer her popcorn, John.
おい、やばい、永遠に食うじゃん、こいつ。
John was in stitches.
カイン27。シングルマザーちょっときついかもしれんな。
Karen had invited John straight over. She was not fooling around. Very exciting. And now she wanted him round the back. Karen let John know that the cake was only for the kids. So was the candy and the piñata. And that she'd be back in 1 hour.
メロディちゃんかわいいだろ多分。変わんねえわ。
John laughed at Melody's hilarious bullfrog story. She was adorable. Everything was going perfectly.
嵐来たってまずいって急に来るぞ。
John never saw Melody again.
Sharona must be.
So far, Weena had been a parade of weirdos and rejections. If this date didn't work out, John vowed to give it up. But maybe this time, maybe today would be his day. Sharona sighed and said, "You'll do."
急に結婚するの？急に？どういうこと？急に？あいつ待ってったっけ
？John felt a little underdressed and a lot overwhelmed. He was surrounded by strangers, and Sharona was glaring at the muscular groom. At least John hadn't missed out on the cake. John realized that Sharona had only brought him to create some penis envy. What a terrible plan, for so many reasons. John got excited. They were going to cut the cake. "He's mine!" Sharona screamed as she launched herself at the newlyweds. Suddenly, penises were up and yelling, "No, he's mine!" It was a no-holds-barred cockfight.
やばい、切られる。やば、どういうこと？逃げればいい。
As John dodged flying glasses and cake, he felt a stab of envy. The groom had dozens of penises after him, and John had none. It was just wrong.
怖すぎるって。
John left the screams and explosions behind him. It was a disastrous end to his online dating.
どういうこと？何があったのあれ？
He had tried everything, and it just wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough. Maybe the bullies from school were right. John was a natural-born loser. Swans were so simple. If you gave them bread, they liked you. But you can't take a swan to a reunion.
お前らこっち来れねえのか。あ、来るかい。マジでこのゲームね、思ってたより全然長かった。入りそうじゃねこれ。よし。あ、光。
John wanted what that room had. Love. Real love. The kind that makes penises fight to the death.
カスがよ。光で逃げたわ。あ、ちゃんと止まれよ。オッケー。仲良くなったんかい。
Days later, the question was still bugging John. Why were so many penises in love with the groom? No one loved John. It wasn't fair. John deserved attention. He had money and Buttstagram pics of his adventures. He even still had quite a lot of stuff. What did that penis have that John didn't?
どういうこと？ディッシュ皿でしょ？割るしかなくね？割れってこと？どういうこと？わかんなかった。英語むず。What show TV? Show TV. Okay.
Then it hit John. That penis was so strong and hard. That's what everyone wanted. That's what John wasn't. That's what John had to be to find love. It was time to hit the gym.
Hit the gym. He's a suck.
John arrived at his local gym. A part of him couldn't believe he was here. He just wasn't a gym penis. But John had tried everything else. If he wanted to get the perfect date, he'd need to sign up. Sam? What was he doing here? Of course, Sam was married. John's theory was right. If you get muscles, you get love. Out of nowhere, Sam asked John how he was doing. Really doing. For a moment, John wanted to be honest. But he didn't come to gym to be a softie. John was here to get hard. It was John's first time in a gym since school. He tried not to read too much into that. Sam went on ahead with a chipper promise to meet up with John inside. John had two options. He could try month by month, or if he signed the 10-year Big Muscles Big Savings contract, he'd get a free easy squeezy water bottle. John only needed muscles for the reunion. After that, he wouldn't care. The gym's clean peen pool policy meant that John would have to do something he had never done before. Get naked in front of strangers. Maybe he could set a record for speediest cleanse.
Get naked.
Naked, John could feel the blanket of steam intimately against his private parts. John tried rinsing off in the toilet bowl. He did not get clean. John pretended he was alone and not surrounded by wrinkly, wet cocks. What was John nervous about? That he would be laughed at? There was nothing funny about a naked penis. But John was starting to feel good without clothes. Damn the hygiene issues of using gym equipment naked. Sam enthusiastically greeted John and offered to show him around, obviously not realizing that John was a natural athlete. The pool was like baptism, the icy water washing away John's flabby flab. He found his stroke, gliding through the water like an eel with large, ungainly testicles. John stuck close to Sam, just to make sure Sam knew John could swim. Not because John was worried about drowning. No, not that. He was slowing down a bit, flailing a bit. But John pushed on, knowing that looking good in a Speedo was the only thing that could save him from an empty existence. John wanted to take a break, forever. The pool was not his friend. It was not the blissful wet dream of his fantasies. It was a hellish prison of murderous fluid determined to drown him. No wonder life crawled out of the sea, desperate to escape the water. Done. John had not drowned, but more importantly, he had not quit. Time to hit the weight room. The diving board. At school, all the peenlets had to jump off it, but John had been too scared. Well, John wasn't a scared peenlet anymore. Well done, John. The judges give you 3 for form, but 9 for enthusiasm. John tried to strike up a conversation with the sleeping sunbather. He really wanted some attention, maybe a compliment. John deserved a compliment.
何すればいいのこれ。あば、あば。ちょっと楽しい。
Rejected. Well, that was fine with John. He didn't want any distractions anyway. Fresh from conquering the pool, John felt ready for anything the gym could throw at him, even heavy metal weights. Clearly, John knew how to handle equipment. Sam cheered John on, as if he needed it. Adrenaline coursed through John's veins, his butthole clenched like a fist. John was forging himself into the peen he saw on movie screens, bulging and sweat-slicked, hard and shiny. John smashed the mirror. He didn't want to look at his old body. He wanted to be hard. Boom! John was cocked and loaded. John, getting flung from fast-moving objects since preschool. Like the sweet sound of spaghetti and meatballs hitting a wall. Slow and steady. That's right, John. Like a lover. Or pouring gravy. Would John ever learn? Odds are no.
っ飛べ。死んでるだろ、あれ寝てるんじゃなくて。
That had gotten John's heart rate up and his life expectancy down. John was sweating like a senator on a sex tape, but he wasn't done. John took a deep breath, clenched, and pulled. Sam made this look so easy. John squashed the thought. He'd just have to push harder.
見ないでください。
John tried to make eye contact with Sam, get in his head a bit.
ビートサム。
Sam didn't seem to notice John, but John could tell Sam was impressed. Even though he still hadn't looked at John, not that it mattered to John, because John was in the zone, deep in the zone.
ごめんなさい。別の配信でもう一回来てもらっていいですか？うわー、壊しちゃった。
With the sound of a deflating truck tire, John's sphincter gave out. Sam congratulated John for trying and told him it was okay to take things slow, as if John was going to quit. Well, he wasn't. John had a mission, and the reunion was getting closer.
いや、待って、俺これ切られてるんだ。てか、1時間ぐらいやってるんだけど。食い方。画面しかないんだよ。この間のエピックスのまあまあ、あれぶりですかね。ごめんなさい、アイコン確認しなかったです。この名前の声ですよ。大会です。そんな食う量あったかくない？トレーニングの成果そんな簡単に出るんだ。テトリスやってるだろ。テトリスじゃねえんだけど。マジでさ、ひたすらトレーニングする配信だ。セルフワーク。どういうこと ?Go to right。ああ、これがなんかチャプターの終わりみたいな感じなんかな。Go to left。レフト遠くない？クロスアロード。道をあーうちあ、さっきのね。未来に見えてるから。俺かわいそうなんだけど。ちょっと待ってくださいよ。これ趣味とか言わないでくださいよ。スクール怖すぎるって。何のスクールだよこれ。うわーうおスクール怖すぎるって。これで止まる？もしかしてこれで止めていけって。怖い。もう血に染まってるって。ああちょっと待って、玉ヒュンしてきた。俺のが危ない。オッケー。 うわー、トラップが危な。どういうこと？なんで俺こんなに嫌われてるの？骨入ってるし。どうした？急にそんなあれだったっけ、このゲーム。あー、きれいに全部引っかかるじゃんこれ。よいしょ。もっと違うゲームになってる。ドア、ザ・ライト。はい。浅いな、罠が。親に見られた。何が？ジョンの生活を見てるだけだね。インポレス。ああ。どういうこと？わかんないんだけど。No one will ever love you. 伸びてる。あ、食われる。
As soon as John woke up, the mirror called to him.
悪夢すぎるもん。
His abs looked like a pack of vacuum-sealed hot dogs.
ここから気になってき
Tasty.
たら。
Jim had
これ気にな
remade
る方
John
相
into
当
a
っすよ。
sculpted dongus.
3 weeks.
He was finally everything a peen should be. Successful, traveled, and photogenic. It was time for his morning pre-gym
デートだ
workout.
けできないの？
The swan was starting to like John. It hadn't tried to peck his eye out in hours.
めっちゃ腹筋割れてるやん。ひも。いやでもどうせ男子みんなこういうの好きでしょ。男子っていつもそうですよね。これは気に入りしかない。ピッツァ、トレードミルってなんだ？英語わかる方、トレードミルでお願いします。こいつ影響されすぎる。わあ、強すぎるって。
The reunion invitation caught John's eye.
リロードインバイト。もう一回やれって。
He read it again and again.
バカだろこれ。
He'd gotten
誰
the
がこ
date
れでト
wrong.
レーニングできるんだ
Very
よ。
wrong. The reunion was tonight. Tonight! He'd have to go alone.
注射出てきた。
They'd all be there, and they'd look at John and they'd know he was still a loser. No, there was still time. John needed a date fast. He'd have to go out.
えぐいな、その。
He'd have to make an impact. John had to dress his best, only better. Oh my, John. Welcome to the gun show.
クラブに行けってこと？
There had to be someone single and desperately alone in the city. Someone besides John. He just had to find them. John went straight to the nearest bar. Sure, it was still early, but he couldn't waste any time. There must be some day drinkers he could pick up.
急に乱闘騒ぎになる？仲間じゃないんかい。
It was a classy place. Even the vomit was high quality. The bouncer looked like a hagfish that had taken up lacrosse.
なんで？
Much better. Badass. Classy. John stepped into the bar and saw her. The answer to the question, what was John's purpose? Her. Loving her. Being with her. Taking her to the reunion. Their eyes met and John knew she felt the same. Gladys did not feel the same. But John wasn't going to give up on their life together. A couple of drinks would loosen her up to their destiny. Wow, Gladys was not an amateur when it came to drinking. John had to keep up. It was working. Gladys was definitely warming up to John. John's bladder was very full. It sloshed audibly as he moved. Holy balls! John had never felt such relief.
Oh, そっち側なんだっけ。出れなくなったけど。そっち側だったんだ。うわー。ごめんなさい、見たくないです。ごめんなさい。
If only John could wash off the embarrassment like he washed off the urine. John looked around. Gladys was gone. John cursed his petite bladder. It was clear the cockpit was on autopilot. Time for John to hit the next bar. John's anxiety had sunk under the surface of the beer he'd drunk, while his confidence was floating high. This was the place he'd find love.
うわー、怖い怖い怖い。そんな凶暴な人いる？
It was empty, except for the bartender. Clearly this bar's only special was unhappy hour. 2 for 1 was a good deal though, and so far the beer had lifted John's spirits. Another 4 would make him feel twice as good. The bartender gave John a smile that set his heart hammering. He had to impress her.
急に拡大されたんよ。ギバン、イベン、チップ。もっとやるよ。チップだ、チップ。
What was so offensive about offering a big tip in exchange for a date? John had thought bartenders loved tips. He needed to find a better club, one with a vibe. John was drawn by the pulse of the music. It pulled him forward like a moth to a fiery death. John was running out of time to find a date and prove that he wasn't a loser. Dancing, the real way to flirt, the way of animals, of wild sexual creatures. John strutted and shook his booty. With booze buzzing round his head, John found himself on the dance floor. Everyone was up close and sweaty. John was exhilarated. He felt alive. John was working himself up to try a little bump and grind. It was a moment out of a movie. John alone on the dance floor with a gorgeous penis, their sexual chemistry exploding. She moved away, coyly. John could tell when someone was playing hard to get. He let her marinate in the tension before making his move. John wasn't taking no for an answer. Some people have no sense of fun, but John was certain the next bar would be different. The next bar wasn't different. John couldn't understand why everyone was so sensitive. It was like no one wanted to have a good time. Like no one had a sense of humor. John had meant that as a compliment. When did the world get so uptight? John's ego was as bruised as his shaft. He had to admit it. He'd failed. He was where he belonged, in a creepy murder alley covered in trash.
なんとかして入ろうとするジョン。
John would have to go through the garbage to get out. Oh, that's gross. Oh, it's so moist, but textured. It smells like rotting dick yogurt. John's misery was sour in his mouth. He needed a drink to wash it down. There was still one bar he hadn't been kicked out of yet. John had cleaned himself up as much as possible. He really needed a mint. John got it in, but he needed more to satisfy the machine. Nailed it. John let out his anger, his frustration. Life was a shitty joke. It wasn't fair. You want to mess with John? Do you?
かなんか持てなくなったんだけど。ちょっと待ってね。リセットちゃう。お前のチャプターで。
The next bar wasn't different. John couldn't understand why everyone was so sensitive. It was like no one wanted to have a good time. Like no one had a sense of humor. John had meant that as a compliment. When did the world get so uptight? John's ego was as bruised as his shaft. He had to admit it. He'd failed. Oh, that's gross. It's so moist, but textured. It smells like rotting dick yogurt. John's misery was sour in his mouth. He needed a drink to wash it down. There was still one bar he hadn't been kicked out of yet. John had cleaned himself up as much as possible. He really needed a minute.
今から俺辛いのダメなんですよね。なんか知らんけど。なんか手が濡れてたからダメだったみたいな、そういうことだったのかな。一回乾かすか。乾く気配ないな。マッカー最近行ってないかも。1.5 やつ確かに。金が1ドルだよな。操作性悪い。
John nailed it.
Whoa.
John let out his anger, his frustration. Life was a shitty joke. It wasn't fair. You want to mess with John? Do you?
これ絶対ダメじゃん。ゲットはミント。多分この自販機がミントなのは分かった。どうしたらいいんだろう。ここマジで詰まった。洗ったろかな。マジでわかんない。もう飽きたなこれ。終わっかな。よくわかんない終わり方しそう。だって英語読めないって致命的じゃない？
The next bar wasn't different. John couldn't understand why everyone was so sensitive. It was like no one wanted to have a good time. like no one had a sense of humor. John had meant that as a compliment. When did the world get so uptight? John's ego was as bruised as his shaft. He had to admit it. He'd failed. He was where he belonged, in a creepy murder alley covered in trash.
ストーリー飽きた？ちなみにね、もう僕も飽きてる。バロラントやろうかな。配信枠変えようかな、そろそろ。
John would have to go through the garbage to get out. Oh, that's gross. Oh, it's so moist, but textured.
パーティーやりません
It smells like rotting dick yogurt. John's misery was sour in his mouth. He needed a drink to wash it down. There was still one bar he hadn't been kicked out of yet. John had cleaned himself up as much as possible. He really needed a mint.
誰くんだっけ？めちゃくちゃ可愛いんやな。夜空ゆいと。夜星なんだ。夜星ゆいとくんってらしい。
John got it in, but he needed more to satisfy the machine. Nailed it.
OK, incense. Select A mint. A mint って。
John let out his anger, his frustration. Life was a shitty joke. It wasn't fair. You want to mess with John? Do you?
Head これで分かんなかったらさすがに終わろうと思うわ。この配信親の前で見れたらすごいよ。重さすぎる。さすがに。どうしたらいいの？親の前、あ、そうか、さっき言ってたよ。親に見られるのは任せてるの。マジか。いや、息子はこんなん見たら心配するわ、確かに。あ、落ちる落ちる落ちる。そういうこと？殴って落としたってこと？だよね、落とせってことだよね。落ちろ。多分これ落とすんですよ、ぶつかりがけて。ヘッド バットって言ってるから、ヘッドバットが何か知らんけど、なんか浜の方で叩くのってだけ入れるから、なんかリターンヘッドバットなんかいけそうな気がする。時間決めよっか、これ。何分まで粘ってできなかったらみたいな。45分だな。45分まで粘ってできなかったら諦める。終わりだもんな。どうしようっていうマジでこのゲームむずない？プレスリターンでしょ、多分。プレスリターントゥヘッドボイルでしょ。どっかにリセットボタンがあるから押せって言われてるのか。マジでわかんねえ。なんあったりしても知らないんだ。よくわかんないところに詰まったんだけど。慣れたよくわかんないっす。なったんじゃねえ45分。あ、46分だ。待って、なんか悔しいな、普通に。リターンでもないしな。
This is what you get.
なんかいけたんだけど。
Fuck you, you fucking thing. You had one job. Die, 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 die. That's how you get what you want. Mental.
エンター押したらいけたわ。わかんねえ、めっちゃ金払っちゃった。しかもリセットボタンじゃなくてぶっ壊すってことあったの。
John wanted the strongest drink they had. Rough night? Someone asked John. He hadn't noticed her when he came in, but now he did. It really had been a rough night for John, but he felt a little better that someone cared enough to ask. But destiny had given John a second chance. John made his move. Unfortunately, according to Alice and to her boyfriend Chadrick, it was the wrong move. Chadrick threw John into the alley and followed, making unoriginal but still terrifying threats. Oh my god! Ouch! Get him, John! I can't watch. Don't hold back! Give it to him! John had survived. No! He'd won. He'd won! He'd won! He wasn't a loser. And there was the proof lying in a bruised, bloody heap. John didn't need a date to the reunion. He needed to go over there and beat the pre-cum out of those dicks. High school reunion, the perfect time to teach someone a lesson.
攻撃あるんだ。あ、なんか落ちたんだけど。ザ・ゲームクラッシュ。なぜかここでクラッシュしましたね。もうやめろって言われてるわ。マジか。悲しいな。で、一旦やめよっかな、配信。一旦やめて、枠立て直してバロラントします。はい、ありがとうございました。バイバーイ。